Welcome back to another episode of the Quiet Out Loud. Before we jump into it, as always, got to read our disclaimer. Our guests are appearing and representing themselves. They can choose to give as much detail or as little detail as they like, but they are representing ideas that they have now. These ideas are not to be held in perpetuity, and they are not representative of the organizations that they are a part of. Again, these are for the individuals. Um, our guest today probably needs no introduction, but I'm going to let him do one anyway. Tom, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Tom Hackwell, the founder, CEO of Pinpoint. We're an applicant tracking system serving the US and UK markets. I'm a massive nerd, super passionate about kind of candidate experience, passionate about employee experience post that, and kind of just trying to bring like a slightly nerdy slash data driven perspective to the world of recruitment, and hence why I love Ben's epic hoodie.
I mean, it's that's a fantastic hoodie, and I certainly know that I've definitely appreciated what you've done with Pinpoint, how you've methodically built Pinpoint. I wouldn't say it's a nerd like it's a bad thing. It's a nerd like somebody who cares. But people have already heard me speak, so I'm gonna let Ben take it away.
Yeah. We'll get it started with the big question. What's that quiet in your space that you want to tell us about?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I think like I'm going to try and make it a bit broader, and I guess the quiet in my space, from my perspective, is that just people don't give enough of a about their people, right? So like when we talk about what it means to work as part of a team or work in an organization, I think we start just like from an exceptionally low baseline, right? And I think that like I find that almost like offensive in 2025. I think we've seen lots of people, especially post COVID, sort of take a much more pragmatic and progressive view on candidate experience, but it sort of stops there oftentimes. And I think people aren't putting anywhere near enough effort into thinking, like, hey, what actually matters for Ben and for Jeremy when they're working as part of this team? And how is this team and that experience helping prepare them for the next thing in their life, both personally and professionally, right? And I get super passionate about thinking about like how we can help organizations do that better, how we can kind of work together to sort of set a new level of expectation there, right? And I just think a lot of people, because they're not getting that stuff right, the jobs they're doing and the roles they're doing are just so sort of samey, regardless of where they work, that it's really very difficult to differentiate. So maybe a long answer, but hopefully that kind of makes a bit of sense.
And I think that it's a great answer and it's a great angle, especially with some of the news that we've been seeing out of today, I think, or not today, but this week, even with what some CEOs are saying around the use of AI. And I think not to take it down the AI track, but to ask you the question, a lot of companies are sort of saying, all right, well, we don't want to hire if we can be doing this task could be done by AI, which from a business sense makes sense, but from a people sense kind of might seem a little bit jarring to folks. How do you think about that? How do you think about kind of the rhetoric you're hearing from other founders who are thinking about and using and incorporating AI?
So it looks a great question. And I think, yeah, there's been a couple of memos of the past couple of weeks, right? Toby Luke, courtesy of Shopify, had a memo. I think Louis Von Ahn at Duolingo had a similar one talking about exactly what you're saying, right? We're default AI organizations. If you're asking for headcount, show me why you can't do it with AI first. If you're asking for more people, more budget, more efficiency, how do we solve that problem with technology? With people? Look, I think I'm a nerd. I like AI. I think it has a place. I also think that people are irreplaceable in many circumstances, right? And I think my kind of default stance, and I hate to keep using the word baseline here, but like the baseline expectation for me is we want exceptional people, and we'll actually create roles for problems that don't yet exist to make sure we can kind of hoard all the exceptional people we possibly can. What we want to do is embellish those exceptional people with the right tools, the right information, the right data, and we want to help them work together more effectively. What we're not trying to do is hire 20 less people next month or next year on account of the fact that we think ChatGPT or some sort of verticalized AI tool could do that for us, right? I think my point is just that I think like a lot of people talk about maybe Jeremy is 10x a better engineer than Tom. My thing is I want the Jeremy, but I want the Jeremy that's actually in the right place for himself or herself at Pinpoint or at any team that we're working on, right? And I think when we think about recruitment, we'll often spend a lot of time trying to make sure that we understand what is Jeremy going to do after Pinpoint? And how do we make sure that Pinpoint is actually going to be able to deliver some value on that journey, right? How do we be the best stepping stone? AI is not going to change that lens through which we look at people. And if we find someone that we think Pinpoint's a great stepping stone for, we almost always are going to lean into that interaction, regardless of what's happening with AI or otherwise.
I think you said something important there, Tom, and you mentioned it when you were talking about your answer to our first question. The care, the lack of care that goes into looking after people. And as you're talking about the AI piece, like that really resonates with me as we talk about how we're going to leverage technology to help us next productivity and those kinds of things. But the care that you're describing talks about the person first. How are we going to take care of that person both now and in the future to help them develop themselves professionally, if you want to take it to the extent personally as well, to build the skills for now and what later will look like? Because to your point, I think the human aspect will never go away, and AI is not going to be able to replace that. And so the organizations that are able to understand that now, there are lots of places that think of retention as like the best metric for how they're doing in an organization. But I think that is going to ultimately change. And so I'd love to hear from you, like, what does that care look like for you? You described a little bit about that development, but what else does that care look like?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I'll start by saying that, like, A, I agree with everything that you just said, and B, I think if we see that care or that kind of human element of the experience of working with us as the main point of differentiation between us and everyone else we're competing with, a world in which everyone's defaulting to AI everything actually is a win for us because we stand out even more by leaning in on that kind of human, empathetic, genuine care and interest perspective, right? And so I think we see it as very much a positive. I think to talk about how that kind of plays out in the real world, we spend a lot of time just trying to really make sure we're touching base with people all the time in a very structured way to understand what they actually want. So we deploy a thing internally at Pinpoint called the Tour of Duty. The idea of a tour of duty is once a year, I spend 30 minutes with every member of the team. I interview them. I ask them a set of exactly the same structured questions. And like, examples of those questions are, why did you join Pinpoint? When are you going to leave? What are you going to do when you leave? How can we support you in making sure that the chance of you accomplishing your objectives when you leave are as high as possible? Is there anyone interesting in the business that has a skill you'd love to learn? Actually, I think when we talk about it's just asking the questions and actually investing the time needed to do that, right? Like, if I don't know that you want to learn X from this person, or I don't know that actually in the future you want to be head of marketing at a small business, I can't go create that opportunity and I can't leverage that for you. If we know that, we can do that. And I think just to take it one step further without hogging the mic too much here, like we've talked about AI, I'm using AI to make that process easier because I have to do hundreds of these a year now. Right? I'm using AI to transcribe that conversation. I'm using AI to find summaries. I'm using AI to search that stuff when opportunities arise in the business so I can find out who wants those opportunities. So AI plays a role, but AI is not doing that for me and it never could. And I think that's that kind of interesting tension, right?
Well, and you're allowed to hog the mic. I mean, that's a fun thing. I mean, at this point, we're in it and we love it. One of the things, so love what you're saying right there, because it also leans in on internal mobility very heavily. Because if somebody, let's say I'm working for you and I say, hey Tom, I can't be like, hey Tom, I really want to learn how to be the CEO because I'm imagining myself as the CEO of Pinpoint, but I assume somebody could probably say that there's still the elements of, hey, look, we want to develop our talent. We're not thinking about not giving these people skills because they will leave. It's we're giving people these skills because if we don't, we're going to obviously set ourselves back. So it's this infinite mindset. I want to go back to something that you had mentioned earlier, which was you said, we look to identify, we want to hoard great talent, and hoarding great talent, helps us. We're looking to identify the problems down the line. And if there are problems that we can sort of see coming up ahead, we want to have our solution and everything in place. So we'll even create rules for people. I think one of the things in the TA world, and Ben and I have both experienced on the ops side, is what happens when there's like, okay, all of a sudden there's this great talent on the market. I think we saw it, but the fastest one that comes to mind is when Sam Altman was ousted and then literally had an offer from Microsoft within a couple of hours. And it was like this whole weekend bonanza. On the rec ops side, we're sitting here going, hey, but wait, you didn't follow this process. You didn't like what is this about it? We're blowing up the headcount plan. We're doing all of these things, but it's an exceptional candidate. I think going into it as candidates, as people who have looked for jobs, how do you sort of look to this is really an exceptional candidate that we're talking about here? We do need to change our process or we do need to do these things. And how would somebody know that they are an exceptional candidate?
I think the second question is really hard to answer. Like, it's a great question, but like how somebody would know they're an exceptional candidate is a really, really tough one. I think our job in that process is to, as we see it, right, is to try and make it as easy as possible for you to identify up front if you're an exceptional candidate for us. Because what that means is obviously, ideally, really distinctly different company to company. You could do a software engineering role at Pinpoint and you could be an unbelievably great candidate for us. And that would be, you could equally be a terrible candidate for someone with a very similar job, right? And I think that's why we spend a lot of time when we think about going out to the market for a role, talking about what does it mean to work here? What are you going to hate? And really, actually, to be honest, we spend most of our time in our job descriptions and in our initial interview processes trying to convince you not to join. And actually, if at the end of you trying to be, including me, joining a call and just telling you all the things that are horrible about working here, because there are many, if after that you still think that you like the cut of our jib and you want to come and work at Pinpoint, by that point, you tend to realize that you're an exceptional candidate and we've done our job correctly, right? And I think the advice I would give is just try and put as much of the downside up front in your outgoing messaging as you can to help candidates self-select into that. I think on the flip side, I think your broader question around like, how do we identify exceptional candidates and how do we kind of circumnavigate process? I think we get to cheat, right? I have a stupid job title. I'm the founder and the CEO. I can broadly, within reason, do what I want. So I'm allowed to kind of pull some strings there sometimes. And I think what we've tried to do, though, is set a culture and set a scene where people going through the recruitment process from our head of talent all the way through to the hiring manager, they understand that it's an exceptionally positive outcome if they meet Jeremy and Jeremy wasn't a hire in their team, but Jeremy found somewhere else to be in the business, right? I think like that, and we'll reward people as like a referral bonus if they bring somebody into the business that lands somewhere other than where we first thought they would, right? And I think we're trying to train everybody from, again, the most senior folks in the org down to the hiring managers to understand that we always want exceptional people. And I think defining internally what that means has been really important to us, right? And again, that will vary from company to company, but we have kind of a very clear idea of the folks who do really well here. And we tend not to miss that. And the last thing I'll say is that point on progression that you referenced earlier and sort of how does that kind of compete with the hoarding of talent? You can come to me in a tour of duty and say you want to be the CEO. In fact, we have a member of the team who has done that. And by the way, that person is so good at what they do that the chances are high that when one day I am not the CEO of Pinpoint, they will be. And we think that's phenomenal. Like we want to celebrate every part of that, right? Because that conversation has been happened.
Getting close to time. Ben, you wanna get into our last question here?
Yeah. I think this whole conversation has revolved around changing the expectations and moving the bar for where the expectations are, whether it's in the last answer, how you structure the interview, right? Like, I'm going to convince you the reason why you shouldn't even bother talking to us. Don't even bother filling out an application with us because it's hard and here are the things that make it hard about working here. To, we care about you and we want to take care of you and we're invested in you as a person that performs a role and as a human. What would you say? What would you say to somebody that is the next Tom to be able to go into or create an organization and say, like, we need to change something right now? What would be that first thing that you would tell somebody to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I'm advising somebody who's starting a business to change one thing from the norm, it's probably exactly the stuff you've just summarized, Ben, which is like go out to market and understand who it is that's actually going to be successful at your business. I think the biggest frustration that I see is incredibly smart people being incredibly ineffective because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think like timing is just this variable that is just so poorly understood in the context of recruitment. Like we have this, we're a small business, right? We're like just over 100 people. We have this conversation all the time. The person who was the right person to lead our marketing org when we were 10 people is very unlikely to be the right person to lead the marketing org at 100 people. It's also very unlikely to be the marketing org at 500 people. And if we pretend that that's not true, when we're at 100 people, I have to have a really difficult conversation with the person that does marketing at Pinpoint. If we knew that was true in advance, they don't feel like they're being marginalized and they can continue to deliver unbelievable value at the business. And we can also own that transformation and make sure we can put them somewhere else of value or help them find the next thing. And I think what that does is it builds incredible trust, which is an underweighted currency organizationally. It helps you attract people who are going to be instrumental at your business, and your business is all that actually matters. The fact that Jeremy's epic for Google and Ben's epic for a tiny business doesn't help me, right? And so I think like really understand the importance of aligning timing with intelligence and make sure that your messaging to the market and the way you think about recruitment reflects that is probably the big one for me.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I do too. And just to kind of hop on it real quick, because it sounds like you've thought about these ideas very, very deeply. And usually when people have thought about these ideas very, very deeply, something has happened in their career to get them to think very, very deeply about these things and how they want to solve them. So for you, what do you think is the behind your career that has kind of influenced some of the ideas we talked about here, or just could be very, very different in general?
I think you hit the nail on the head. All of this perspective is really just born out of my own experience. It's not particularly intelligent or insightful. It's just like a reaction to lived experience, right? Like I think I started my first business when I was 16 and it grew super quickly and I hired like 12 people and they all were terrible. The reason they were terrible is not because they were stupid or because they were lazy. It's because they were not comfortable working in an organization run by a 16-year-old that didn't know what he was doing. And that's completely fine. But what I should have done is put much more weight onto the fact that you're going to come and work for like a geeky, pimply 16-year-old that doesn't know what he's doing. And if you're not comfortable with that, you're not going to do very well here. So like that happened. That business, unsurprisingly, by the time I was 21, had grown really huge and then failed and blown up in my face. And I had to go work for another company. And I went and worked there for 4 years and sorted myself out and all these other things. And I was quite smart and I was quite hardworking, but I didn't have the impact on that business that I could have done because again, the environment and the timing just wasn't aligned with my skill set and what was exciting for me. And it's literally just my reaction to going, well, where did those two things go wrong? And is that true elsewhere? Actually, when you speak to most people, they'd agree that it is true. And so like, what's the sort of opposite? There's nothing more intelligent to it than that, really.
Before we, I mean, first, but it shows learning. It demonstrates curiosity. It demonstrates reflectiveness, and these are all the things that are important for correcting mistakes or correcting timing errors of the past, and that's phenomenal. Before we Ben walks us out, anything you want to just plug, share, anything there that we can help amplify your voice on, tell people where to connect with you. Feel free to go right there.
Sure. Yeah. Look, thanks for the opportunity. I think, look, we build Pinpoint. We really deeply care about this stuff. We care about recruitment through its organizational design and kind of every component part of what it means to build a phenomenal team. If you're interested in seeing if we can help you with that, we'd obviously love to talk to you and you should check out our product at pinpointhq.com. I think I'm just on a personal note, always happy to shoot the breeze and talk about organizational design and some of these concepts. So if I can ever add any value to that dialogue, I'd love to do so, but not here to sell you anything. Just enjoy talking about stuff and trying to make businesses better.
Amazing, Tom. Thank you very much for joining us. Really, really valuable and insightful information that you shared. Best of luck at Pinpoint. Thank you so much. Thank you for another episode of The Quiet Out Loud, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.